Hello and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. If you haven't heard the news, Fallen Empires Remastered is coming to us on MTG Arena. It's going to impact all of the formats: Historic, Timeless, Brawl, and yes, Standard. I have a top 10 list for Standard cards if you haven't checked that out. And its own limited format. It's going to have Draft and Sealed. So, this is my limited set review for Fallen Empires. And I've been through all of the colors already. This is the last installment. There are no multicolored cards. We're ending on Colorless and Land. So let's take it away with Aeola Pile. I don't know how this is pronounced. It's a 2-mana artifact. It's a rare. There's a cycle of these, actually. I pay 1 and tap, sacrifice this. It deals 2 damage to any target. These are modeled after the original cycle from Alpha, right? You know, Lightning Bolt, Ancestral Recall, all of the things that cost 1 mana and do 3 of something. Well, there's a cycle of rare artifacts in Fallen Empires that model them. Generally, they cost 2 mana, pay 1, tap and sack, and they do 2 of something. In this case, we have the probably most premium piece of removal in the entire set. It can't deal with everything. There are a few creatures that are too big to be hit by an Aeola Pile, but it does deal with some of the early creatures that are the most problematic. It kills a Mind Stab Thrall. It kills a Nechrite. It kills, a Feralite Zealot. And if you're lucky, it'll kill whatever's wearing a Feral's Mantle. Although, the white deck might be able to put that on a creature that has 3 or more toughness. So, this is grade A premium removal, goes in every color. I don't know that you can rate it higher than a 3.5, because at the end of the day, it does not win the game. It can go face, you can point it anywhere, but still, I think it's really hard to rate this higher than a 3.5, because even though removal's at a premium and this is the best piece, and everyone's going to be fighting you for it, I still don't know if I can rate it above the bombs that are going to give you a strategy to win the game in the various colors. But this is somewhere around a 3.5 or a 4. Balm of Restoration. This is a 2-mana artifact. You can pay 1 tap and sacrifice it. Choose one. You can gain 2 life, or you can prevent the next 2 damage to be dealt to any target this turn. So, you almost always want to be preventing 2 damage. One of the neat things that this can do is you can shut down a ping from something like an Icatian Javelineer or a Thornthalid that would have finished off one of your creatures. In the case of the Javelineer, they never get the Javelin counter back, so you've countered that ability effectively, and they're just left with a 1/1. In the case of the Thornthalid, you're eating up time. Right? They had to invest time, maybe mana, if they've got Fungal Bloom, to pile up counters on the Thornthalid, but you've cost them some combination of time and mana to prevent that effect. It's a tempo play. Otherwise, you can prevent 2 damage just in combat. In order to, win a combat, it's an onboard trick. You can't play this, at instant speed and flash it out, but you can activate it at instant speed. So if the opponent's paying attention, you can't blow them out, but it can force them into some bad blocking situations where they know you have this, but they have to make the block anyway. Very solid card, I think. And as far as the life gain, the only time you might gain life with this card is if the opponent is trying to finish you off with a Goblin Grenade. If they're trying to just burn your face directly, then maybe there's a chance that you would use the Balm of Restoration that way. You could also use it to prevent 2 damage that would be dealt to you from the Goblin Grenade. Overall, I think I rate this a 3. I think it always makes the cut into your deck. It is a fine combat trick. It's a fine way to prevent pingers from picking off your creatures. It doesn't win the game or anything, it's just a very solid card. Next we've got Bottomless Vault, and there is a cycle here. Just like with the rare artifacts, there's a cycle of rare storage counter lands. So this one's for black. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can choose not to untap it on your untap step, and then in your upkeep, if it's tapped, you put a storage counter on it. So you have the choice of whether to leave it tapped and build up the counters, or get access to the mana and not get the counter on it. It's an interesting tension that's built into these cards. They're all useful. They're a little slow. Fallen Empires is a fairly aggressive format, but I still think that you could get pretty good use out of these. I don't know how many you run in your deck necessarily. The other interesting thing about this is it can make a bunch of a single color of mana as only being 1 land. And in that way, it can fix your mana. Right? There are a ton of cards in this set that cost 2 and 3 colored pips of mana, to where it feels like they can only be played in a monocolor deck. But if you get a Bottomless Vault with 2 or more counters on it, you can untap it and play most of the black cards in the set. So in that way, these are mana fixing lands, and that's kind of neat. So I think they usually make the cut into your deck. Maybe a really aggressive deck wouldn't want it in a monocolor, but still I think I rate these about 2.5. Between the mana fixing and the potential ramp, it's slow ramp, but any turn that you would have missed a land drop, this could be ticking up on mana and ensuring you get a big burst of mana later in the game. They're neat. Concorn. So this is a 2-mana artifact, part of the rare cycle. You can pay 1 tap, sacrifice it, draw 2 cards, then put a card from your hand on top of your library. So this is good, solid card selection. It's a little slow, maybe, like just a touch dirtily in a format that's pretty aggressive, where you really would like to be getting on the board in the early turns of the game to be able to block, a Necrite or a Mindstab Thrall or a Feralite Zealot. But this is still a pretty great card. It'll help you cycle through the deck, find the things that you need. And as long as you have a good play set up for next turn, you don't mind putting 1 on top of your library. So overall, I think this card's around a 3. I think it pretty much always makes the cut into your deck. You'd like to be able to find the things that you need out of your deck at the right time. So yeah, it's like 2.5, 3. Next up we have Delif's Cone. This is a common. It has an amazing piece of art by Mark Tedden, which is unfortunate because this is an unplayable piece of garbage. It is a 0-mana artifact. You can tap and sacrifice it. This turn, when target creature you control attacks and isn't blocked, so it has to get through, you may gain life equal to its power. If you do, it assigns no combat damage this turn. And even though there are some creatures in the set that already want to prevent their combat damage to do some other effect, right? Like the Mindstab Thrall, the Necrite, the Feralite Zealot, something with Feral's Mantle. Most of those don't have very high power. They just have 2 power. So you'd still be sacrificing this to just gain 2 life in that case. And that's kind of the best case scenario. I guess there's some sort of a magical Christmas land thing where you reanimated a deep spawn, using Soul Exchange with a Thrall. It came back as an 8/8. And for some reason you need the life more than you need to deal damage to the opponent. It gets in unblocked, and you gain 8 life with the Delph's Cone. Still, most of the time I think it would have been better to deal the 8 damage to the opponent. I think this card's basically just unplayable. I do not know what situation ever comes up, other than a weird corner case against a Goblin Grenade deck, maybe, where gaining the life and preventing damage to your opponent is worth a card in your deck. This is a 0. Delph's Cube. So we've got a 1 colorless artifact. It's a rare. Again, amazing art by Mark Tedden. You can pay 2 and tap. And this turn, when target creature you control attacks and isn't blocked, it assigns no combat damage this turn, and you put a cube counter on Delph's Cube. Unlike the cone that we just looked at, this one doesn't sacrifice. This one gets a counter which you can remove later for 2 mana, which doesn't require tapping the cube. The first ability taps it, the second one doesn't. And you can regenerate target creature. If you're a deck who's trying to attack with a Mind Stab Thrall, or a Nechrite, or, Feralite Zealot, something wearing Feral's Mantle, you can use the Delph's Cube on that creature. It wasn't going to assign combat damage anyway, right? Doing its special effect, it already assigns no combat damage. And you can get a cube counter on the Delph's Cube at the same time. And then you can use it sometime later to save a creature by regenerating it. And that's not terrible. That's not just miserably bad. That's actually using something that you already had a synergy for in your deck to turn this on, to use this defensive effect that can rescue your creatures. All of that being said, Delph's Cube is pretty hard to use. Even in that ideal scenario, you still need to have mana open to activate the cube. So, in a deck that has those creatures and is trying its best to give them menace and flying to get through, unblocked, I don't think there's any reason you wouldn't maybe run a copy of Delph's Cube in that list. That would be fine. Or if you just happen to have a bunch of creatures that are able to attack, then, if you go wide enough, you can pick one of them, use the Delph's Cube, and then regenerate something else that got blocked that combat. It's not useless. There are definitely ways to use the Delph's Cube in Fallen Empires. All that being said, it's not a high pick. It's just a defensive piece, something to save your creatures. It requires setup, requires the right deck. So yeah, I don't take it highly. I think it's between a 1.5 and a 2. For the deck that really wants it, I think it's more like a 2. Kind of middle of the road. Could take it or leave it, but could do some work for you. Otherwise, it's kind of filler. Right? If you're in a position where you can't be attacking, or you can't attack without getting blocked, then the cube isn't doing anything for you. Draconian Silex. This one is interesting. It's a rare, it's 3 mana, artifact. Pay 2, tap, discard a card at random, regenerate target creature. So this one, as long as you can discard a card at random, then you can save one of your creatures with 2 mana open. And this is something that's pretty good going into the long game. Now, this is a pretty aggressive format, so this card's a little slow, and a random discard is painful at times, but later into the game, you've emptied out most of your hand anyway. And you might be able to get down to where you have just 1 card in your hand, and that 1 card is like a basic land, or something you don't mind discarding. If you have a creature on the field that you would like to save more than that card in your hand, then yeah, the Silex can keep it alive, keep it on the field. Right? When you have creatures that are really valuable to you, like Feral's Zealot, Thorn Thallid, stuff like that, you really want to keep them alive to keep getting their value. Then, yeah, in that case, I think it's worth it to be discarding cards to regenerate them. So, I think the Silex is around a 2. It has its uses, it has its decks that would like it. But if you're in a color where your creatures can protect themselves a bit anyway, like blue, then the value on this drops down a lot. Dwarven Hold, this is another storage counter land. Again, I think this is around a 2.5 or a 3. All of these make it much easier to splash other colors in this format because they build up the counters to make you multiple of that single color of mana using just one land. They're very handy for that. Dwarven Ruins, this is an uncommon cycle of lands. They ETB tapped. They can tap for 1 mana of a particular color. You can sacrifice them for 2 mana of a particular color. Now, again, these are useful for color fixing you, but it's potentially at the cost of your land. I think maybe if you have a slower deck, or you want to be absolutely certain that you're able to make a certain play on a certain turn of the game, right? Like maybe you want to be certain that you can play Mindstab Thralls on turn 3. And it's worth it to you to sacrifice the Ebon Stronghold to try to get the opponent to discard 3 cards with the Mindstab Thrall. You could do that. And it can actually accelerate your mana, right? You could play a tapped Ebon Stronghold on 1, sacrifice it on 2 to get the Mindstab Thrall down early. And now the opponent, they either have to take the discard 3 when you sacrifice it, or they have to be chump blocking, because they probably don't have a blocker that early. So these cards can give you an aggressive start into the game. They can also mana fix you. Entering tapped can be a bit of a conundrum, though. Overall, I think these are fine. They're playable, and they can, accelerate you or fix your colored mana problems a little bit. Temporarily, at least. I think they're around a 2.5. Elven Lyre. So this is an artifact, 2 mana. You can pay 1 tap, sacrifice it. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So this is the one that's modeled after Giant Growth. This is a useful card, good trick, can help push through damage, can keep your creature alive against pingers, helps you win in combat against what the opponent's doing. Just all around, generally useful card. I think it basically always makes the cut into your deck. I give it about a 3. Havenwood Battleground, again, these are about a 2.5. Hollow Trees, this is the green storage counter land. So yeah, give it about a 3. Ication Storage, the white storage counter land, again, about a 3. Implements of Sacrifice. So 2 mana artifact, you can pay 1 tap and sacrifice it. Add 2 mana of any one color. Now, we're pretty used to cards like this in Modern Magic drawing a card when they do their thing. This one does not. On the other hand, you can pay 1 on the turn you sacrifice it to get 2 mana, which ramps you. Not the turn you cast it from your hand. That turn you had to pay 2. But on a future turn, it can ramp you 1 mana. It also fixes your colored mana issues. So whether or not you want the Implements of Sacrifice, if you're trying to make a 2-color deck, I think this is more valuable. If you're in a 3-color deck, it's starting to become necessary, along with maybe the storage counter lands, to be able to fix your mana enough to play the game. The ramp could be really good. If you have like a Thrall deck and you're able to get the Ebon Praetor out a turn earlier, or if you're in green and you get the Feral Thallid a turn earlier, those are things that can definitely impact the game. Or you could just play this on 2 to be sure that you can cast like a Feralite Zealot or a Mindstab Thrall or whatever. Since it doesn't replace itself with another card, and you have to sacrifice it to use it, it's more niche. You know for yourself if the ramp would be good or if you're desperate for the mana fixing. So I think this card is about a 1.5. There will be decks that value it more highly because they really need the mana fixing. If you're 3 or more colors, you have to be running some of this probably. Rainbow Veil, this is a land, it's rare. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. Then an opponent gains control of Rainbow Veil at the beginning of the next end step. So Rainbow Veil is a land that passes back and forth between you and the opponent every time it gets used. Now, I don't think I would avoid playing the card, even though if your opponent is a little mean or your opponent doesn't need the mana fixing, they could choose to just not use the Rainbow Veil for the rest of the game and just leave you down a land, which is an option that they have, and that makes the card worse for sure. But it also might mean that the opponent uses it as well, and the game just kind of like goes back and forth. You've got color fixing, they've got a little bit of acceleration and fixing. And that would be a more interesting game. So whether or not you run this card, it's a risk. The risk is up to you. It could leave you down a land for the rest of the game if the opponent plays it that way. But if the opponent's using it, then you'll have an interesting back and forth, and you'll both have good mana. Because of the downside risks on this card, I think I can't rate it higher than about a 1.5. It's still nice to get a land that can tap for any color of mana. That could be worth it even if you effectively lose it. So, it's not necessarily unplayable, but it is potentially bad. It's about a 1 or a 1.5. We have Ring of Renewal up next. This is a rare 5 mana artifact. And you can pay 5 and tap. You discard a card at random, then draw 2 cards. Notice that the colon for the cost of activating this is over here, right? So discarding a card at random is not part of the cost of activating this card. So if you have no cards in hand when you activate the Ring of Renewal, you discard a card at random, which is nothing, and then you draw 2 cards. So when you're empty-handed, this just draws 2. Not bad. This is a fast format most of the time, so usually you won't be in a good position to get all the value from the Ring of Renewal. If the game should go long, though, then there aren't a lot of ways to get ahead on cards in Fallen Empires. You can use your pingers to good effect, but if you get to a stalemate, it's really hard to get up on cards. Ring of Renewal can actually do that for you. So this card, it also plays pretty well if you've got like the storage counter lands and you've been building up mana over the course of the game. So I think Ring of Renewal is a card I would run in most decks as a top end, just as an option. Some decks that are better at stalling the board and setting up for a long game, like if you've got the perfect green deck, which has a lot of spore clouds and stuff and has good early blockers. If you have that deck where you want to be setting up for the long game, then maybe the Ring of Renewal is just another nail in the coffin for the opponent where you're just outvaluing them both in the board state with your Saprolings and in cards. Blue could also potentially make bursts of mana using High Tide, which offsets, some of the cost of using this. So I think there are decks that would want this card. If you have multiple storage counter lands, you can build up a ton of mana. If you're going late, doing a long game, then the card's better for you. Overall, I think I rate it a 2.5. Some decks will love it, other decks don't really need it. Ruins of Trocare, this cycle gets about a 2.5. Sand Silos, another storage counter land. This one's blue. Give it about a 3. Unfortunately, it does not play well with High Tide, but blue is mana hungry anyway, so I think you would run Sand Silos just because it's a storage counter land. Spirit Shield. This one is neat. So there are two pieces of early equipment in Fallen Empires. Don't work exactly like normal equipment now. This is one of them. So 3 mana artifact, it's a rare. You can choose not to untap it on your upkeep. You pay 2 and tap, and a target creature gets +0/+2 for as long as this remains tapped. So you can use this to save one of your creatures from a pinger, you can use it to save something in combat, and then you can choose to leave it equipped. Alright, that's the whole leaving it tapped during your untap step, is you leave the shield equipped to that creature. Or you can choose to just untap it and use it again at instant speed, which is also a great option, just requires mana again. This is a fantastic repeatable trick. Probably one of the best cards in the set, honestly, because you can just do this instant speed interaction over and over again, and makes your cards more resilient to the pingers of the format. So I probably give this card about a 4. Probably any deck in the format wants it. Svelunite Temple. This is the blue uncommon sack land. Gets about a 2.5. And lastly, we have Zellion Sword. So this is the mirror card to the Spirit Shield. 3 mana artifact. You can choose not to untap it during your upkeep. Pay 3 and tap. Target creature gets +2/+0 for as long as Zellion Sword remains tapped. So, again, at instant speed, you can pay 3 mana to give a +2 power boost. So this can blow out a combat step. The opponent should see it coming, but still, the threat of activation can be a big deal, to where maybe you don't have to activate it because the opponent knows that you can. This just takes some of your little creatures and makes them relevant in combat. Takes your bigger creatures and makes them harder to, trade against from the opponent's side of the field. The initial mana requirements are a little steep, but I still think this card is amazingly good in this format. It's repeatable interaction. So, again, I think I rate this card about a 4. I think any deck is going to want the Zellion Sword. And that brings us to the end of Fallen Empires Remastered. So, What do you all think of the set? What do you all think of the limited environment? Are you excited that this is coming to Arena? Sound off in the comments. Please like and subscribe. Check out my other videos. Helps out the channel a lot. And until next time, never stop honing your critical thinking and empathy on this day of April the 1st.